Hi, welcome. My name is Brooke Krause, and I'm presenting joint work with Ani McCarthy. This paper is titled Pastoralists Empower the Impact of a Food Security Program on Women's Agency in Northern Tanzania. So the question that we look to answer is, what's the impact of a women's empowerment and food security program on women's agency as measured by the Livestock Enhanced Project Level Women's Empowerment and Agriculture Index in a highly patriarchal society? So our setting is Northern Tanzania, where predominantly the population that we're studying is pastoralists and polygamous. Women have very low levels of education, high levels of fertility, and are poor even by Tanzanian standards. Households oftentimes have mud floors and mud walls, and very few Swahili speakers, which is the national language of Tanzania. We are working with the Maasai, and so the native language is Ma. So we're in northern Tanzania in the Longido and Simanjiro districts, which is on the border with Kenya. And so it's within these two districts that we sample 14 villages. So the Maisha Bora program that we're evaluating is a multidimensional program where they have different components. And the predominant one is this access to credit and training. So there's the formation of rotating savings and lendings groups through microfinance, which are called VICOBAs, which is Village Community Banks, and also do entrepreneurship and business training as a result. The World Food Program does a nutrition program, which does nutrition and sanitation education at the household level, but then also does school-based vegetable gardens. And then we have Vets Without Borders, which implemented a livestock program. So given how important livestock are for the Maasai community, they do vaccination and livestock health programs to benefit the community. And then there's a women's right. So the Ujamaa Community Resource Trust is one that addresses directly intimate partner violence through educating women about their legal rights and what to do in the face of intimate partner violence, but also legal rights around owning land and owning livestock. And then we had a water management program. So women were incorporated onto water management committees within the community. But the requirement in order to be a member of this community group is that women had to be literate. So they had to be able to read and write, which severely limited the number of women in these villages that were even eligible to be on the water management community. And in addition, this water program did access to water to increase access to water. So the theory of change is that this program and all these different dimensions focus on creating the settings that can create access to sources of empowerment. So women empower themselves, and it's through providing some of these larger structural resources within the community that women have access to different things like credits and markets, access to information, getting information not just about livestock and agriculture, but also nutrition and basic human rights and resources within their community. And then also a business and entrepreneurial training aspect. And then through social capital. So through the formation of these groups, women are forming community groups. They're getting access to other women that they're in the VICOBA groups together with, and sort of learning through each other. And then finally through alleviating time constraints. So spending less time fetching water through the increased access to water access. So our data collection was over a 5-year period, is that we did baseline data collection in 2016 over these 14 villages, so 7 of which were participating in the Maisha Bora program, and 7 of them are comparison villages, which are similar to the treatment villages. We had about 1,000 individuals, which is predominantly women because of the pastoralist nature of the Maasai community. Oftentimes we had a hard time finding men in households because they were with the livestock finding water. Our empirical strategy rests on doing a difference in difference estimation to isolate the impact of the program. So we do this with both weighting and matching techniques, and we try a number of different techniques ranging from nearest neighbor with replacement to an inverse probability treatment weighting. And so we look at all of these different possible weighting techniques because the treatment villages were chosen before the comparison villages. So the evaluation started after the program had started by about a month or two, so the treatment villages were chosen as the most food insecure in the districts of Longido and Simanjiro. And so the comparison villages then were chosen as the second least food secure villages in those villages in the districts. All right, so if we look at the different components of women's empowerment, here we have it split by baseline and end line, and by comparison and treatment groups. And there's just a couple things I'll point out on this slide. So one, you can see on the top right corner is that attitudes about domestic violence are very, very low. So very few women in the sample achieve empowerment within this domain. And so the attitudes about domestic violence is believing that violence is never justified. So over 95% of women believe that in certain circumstances, there are situations where domestic violence is justified. And so we had very few women achieve empowerment in this indicator. Another one I'll point your eyes to is the access to and decisions and credit on the second row, where you can clearly see that that there's an increase in access to credit over time in this program. And the other one is the work balance in the bottom left corner, where you can see that very few women achieve work balance. So these women have really high workloads and are not only working all day productively and towards the house, as well as caring for children at the same time. So our impact evaluation results in an unweighted difference in difference estimator really show that the overall empowerment score does not change as a result of the program. What we do see is that there's an increase in group membership and access to credit, both of which intuitively make sense because these were key components of the program. So the program was developed to create Bacoba groups and get women access to groups and access to credit, and it did that. And so that is a good finding that we find that that does happen. The one that is a little bit more puzzling is that there's a drop in the productive decisions. And so this decrease in productive decisions is a little bit more puzzling. So why would women who are in these Bacoba groups who've gone through the program over time have fewer input into decisions over the household? So here's another way to look at the findings when we plot them. Here we have the coefficients, and as we can see, the ones that are positive are group membership and access to credit. We have a couple that are hanging around 0, and then we have this decline in input into productive decisions. And part of this could be explained, at least through qualitative interviews, as a backlash effect, where we see that as women are becoming involved in groups and getting more access to credit and becoming more empowered, that there's backlash within the household. And so this increase in instrumental forms of empowerment, such as getting access to credit in groups, does not necessarily translate into intrinsic measures of empowerment, such as input into household decisions. And these household decisions then are ones that are really important for household bargaining and bargaining within the household. And so when we see a decline in that, it's an indicator that that programs that seek to provide settings for empowerment for women may need to really carefully think about what types of empowerment that they're addressing. So I want to show the marginal treatment effects with fixed effects. So because this program was so multifaceted and was providing within the villages, not all of the women that we interviewed participated in the components of the program. So just because they lived in the village doesn't mean that they received the treatment. So when we zoom in on this late, the local average treatment effect, here we can see pretty strongly that those who did actually participate in the program have a higher impact, where the coefficient is 0.409 and 0.418 and statistically significant. So those women that actually participate in the program have a higher impact onto their group membership and the credit. And then we lose significance on the input into productive decisions. We looked at a couple secondary outcomes, which I'll just report pretty quickly. One is just a cross-sectional correlation between a baseline level of empowerment for a woman and her dietary diversity at endline. So we see that within the household, the number of unique foods and food groups increases or is higher for women who had higher levels of baseline empowerment. But we see that when we look at the women's dietary diversity, it actually decreases. So it's possible that more empowered women have households who have better diets at the expense of her own diet. And then we looked at intimate partner violence. And so more empowered women at baseline experience less physical and emotional abuse. However, their beliefs about whether or not abuse is justified are the same compared to others. And so here we have that there is this this negative correlation then between empowered women and experiencing physical or emotional abuse. All right, so to summarize our results then quickly, we see a small positive effect on group membership and access to credit using both an unweighted difference in difference and the local average treatment effect. But that we do see that that effect disappears when we use matching methods. So it's possible that that's due to selection of the village, of the groups. We don't see any effect on the overall measure of empowerment, which encompasses the multiple dimensions. And so we think that this really means that the program implementation is extremely important in identifying the areas of empowerment that one wants to support the increase of. So the things that were unchanged were those that intrinsic measures of empowerment that are most important for intra-household decision making. All right, thank you so much.